get it going, guys. I think I'm gonna be just basically editing just the beginning of this. So let's go to standalone. All right, guys. Welcome everyone to today's class. Hopefully you guys are having a great day. Today's gonna be chapter number 1, trading naked charts. Right. So as you can see right here on the on the beginning on the thumbnail, basically we're gonna be doing some trading with naked chart. So what does that mean? It is basically we're gonna be using no indicators and just what we got. We already have learned support and resistances. We already have learned channels, trend lines, patterns, and also candlestick patterns, right? So we should be having already about this time all that we need to have to just start trading successfully and start calling out some shots, right? So other than that, we're gonna be diving after this chapter in chapter 2, 3, and 4 in depth on all of the theories that we learned at the beginning. So we're gonna be just diving on different ways to set up support, resistance, trend lines, so on and so forth. And also we're gonna be piecing out my favorite parts of those areas. Also on the next chapter, which is gonna be chapter number 2, we're gonna be looking at oscillators. Why? Because for me, if we are gonna be choosing something, well, just by looking at the structure of the market, what we cannot look at, it's an oscillator, right? It's just basically grabbing the information that we have on the screen, and then with that information just giving us a little bit of further understanding based on volume. Usually oscillators are based on volume. OC, put comma after naked, get the views up. Oh, absolutely. Maybe I changed that. All right, thank you so much for that trade intuition. Really appreciate it. All right. By the way, that's what I tried to do on the thumbnail, but I don't know. Maybe we'll see if that works. So other than that, let's get it going and let's see what I have on my charts in here. All right, perfect. So this is where we left out, right? Remember, always zoom out before start trading and understand what are you doing here? What is the asset doing, right? Remember your asset fingerprint or your asset's DNA. What do I specify about this? It's basically the market structure, right? And at this point, we can absolutely see that we are ranging, right? So that's why we're located this important ranging zone, that where we ranged before. We also were overextended. We have a violent area of regression here, also right here. That's why we decided that this is going to be for us at least our top of the range for now, right? Let's do something here. Let me try to clone this, and after we clone it, let's now define the bottom range, right? For me, I'm gonna be unlocking this so I can change it, and this is going to be for me the bottom range, somewhere around those areas, right? We also have an important area of ranging to my left, areas of big reaction. There we go, big reaction. And remember that despite this is not perfect in every single case, this one is very close. All right, so let me just right clicking here, let's close it, let's lock it, and now remember we're gonna be looking a little bit now in a zoom in position. What is this? It's basically just checking out the inner structure, right? As we have macro structure, remember big movements in here, right? So this is a big downtrend, big ranging zone, big uptrend, big downtrend, and again big ranging zone. Well, those ranges, for example, you can also define or describe inner ranges or inner trends, right? In this case, we knew, or we were looking at a set of higher lows, right? Higher lows, right? And higher highs in here, and we were going to our area of entry, so, or our area of top of the range, basically where we are planning to short. All right, we know there's a slight chance that we break out, retest, because it's not about the breakout, guys, it's about your retest, and off we go with a trend, right? An uptrend, but usually we're gonna be aiming for what it has been working until we get stopped out, and then we reverse our setup, right, with breakout retest. So basically we had a series of higher lows, right, and higher highs. We use one of my favorite tools in here, which is, let me show you here at the second bottom to my left, it is regression trend. Let me give you guys a little bit of example of what it does, right? I can now choose any point, right? It doesn't matter if it's in here. I can choose even all the way up. It doesn't matter. And then maybe all the way down in here, right? And you see that it's going to take everything that I circle, that I encase, and it's going to show me how or what's the average shape of that range or trend, if you will, right? Also, another thing that we edit in here, it is, let's double click in here, and we are using our, where is it? There you go, inputs, and we're using show lower deviation, show upper deviation, and also source closed. Basically, also we're using just the regular colors, and we are extending, very important, extended lines. This is gonna be giving us so far what we're measuring based on these dots, right? What is the trend, both size and projection. That's important. Look at that. Let's go all the way down here, right? Let's now grab this area here. And now, of course, since we already have the full trend, this is just giving us a further projection. What is it used for? Well, it's not about your breakout. It's about your retest, and off we go, right? Well, we can also talk about major breakout retest, right? And then off we go. Basically calling for this center area of ranging. All right, so far, so good. So what happened with Kava? Well, you can go check out Friday's setup in here. And what we got, rejection, right? It's not about your breakout. It's about your retest, and off we go. So far, should we be looking into taking some profits? Well, that depends on both. Where do you enter? Because if you enter very close, then you're basically on profits. Well, maybe that wouldn't be that such a good idea at this point. But of course, that remember that we should be changing our mindset, right? Remember, 90% of the traders look for how to make the most amount of money, and they get wrecked. Because when you're trying to make the most amount of money, you push it, you push it, you push it to irresponsible zones, right? Instead, we're trying to allocate and save and protect our capital, right? So let's just, for example, go ahead and set up an entry. Not a retest. Maybe we went for the very late entry, right? Something around here because it moved too fast on us. Maybe we FOMO'd in, right? And what are we having right now? Basically, we're barely on our entry here on profits. So, guys, first things first. Are we on a support zone? Well, remember, we need to set up our support, but also important, you can also set it up in an other way. Remember that we have medians, right? Let's go and try to add something that reveals median. Let me see if I have it right here. So you're basically looking for a box. Here we go. And that box, we're going to be drawing it between these two zones. There we go. And it was going to be giving us, if we got it configured correctly, our median line. Did we hit it? Very much, almost right there, almost right on spot. So for me, this could be a TP number one, a late TP number one, right? But what it absolutely is, and of course I'm not gonna miss it, is gonna be moving my stop to entry. Why? I'm already in profit, guys. I shouldn't let it go to red, right? Especially since I already have a multiple candles set up here, right? If we keep going upwards, which is a big chance, all right, is going to stop me out, at profits. There's something that you need to take into consideration here. When you set you stop an entry, well, in my case, and this is of course no financial advice, but in my case, I move my stop slightly in profit. That is to compensate whatever charges, whatever slippage, whatever happens to this area, right? So if I get stopped out, I want to get stopped out at at least $1 or $2 in profits, right? That give me those $1 or $2 added to my account, and not only that, that give me that protection slide for slippage, all right? So I always want to cover my back right there. Let me see if I'm missing any questions in here. Hey, Melissa, welcome back. So, guys, thank you so much for standing by. Well, I had a couple of issues here, but let me also shout you out. Trade Intuition, Uncle Jess, Alexander G. We also have Jonathan. What's up, my friend? Thank you for your questions. I really appreciate them. Who else we got in the house? We have Jay Violet, of course. We have Sam. We have Alexander G. Of course, I already mentioned you. So, guys, thank you so much for sticking around. So, there's 20 of us. So, guys, please click that like button. All right. Now that we basically look at how we should be trading this, or how I would be trading this trade, let's go for our actual entry. Remember what I always tell you, it's not about the breakout, it's about your retest, right? You got your first call out in here, guys. Let me show you. So let's hit it. So basically, I always try to give myself a little bit of a buffering zone, right? What is that buffering zone about? It is basically either entering a little bit before or a little bit after, depending if I'm looking for a long or a short, right? Or after confirmation. What would be my confirmation? Guys, remember when we talked about candlesticks, right? What do I call this kind of wicks, right? I call these areas absorption zones, right? And also, depending on what you're looking at, this is a what, guys? I'm going to be leaving out to you guys. Remember, if you don't know the answer, go check out the previous video, or also check out candlestick patterns or Google, and you'll find usually what this candle is called out. Also, something important, once we have those kind of candles on important zones, is usually calling for a reversal or at least a little bit of volatility. So basically, after closing this candle, I could be just jumping in for a short position all around this other candle. Just call it for the worst case scenario of our entry here, and we should be getting a stop loss on our previous candle here, on our previous high, right? Because we're shorting this, and then giving it a little bit of a wiggle room. This is gonna be a little bit tricky, guys. Why? Because since my entry is not perfect, let me zoom in here so we have a better perspective on what to do. Since my entry is not desirable at this point, it was a late, very late entry, well then I usually, my wiggle room, try to give it a little bit within my channel, right? Remember when we talked about channels? Let's go and do that recap, all right? When we talk about channels, and this channel could be straight channel, right? Up rising channels, something like that. Let's do it, all right? Doesn't matter, or any kind of triangles, right? We got what is called a fake out. Let's go and try to draw this, right? Maybe we're going up, down. Maybe we fake out. We think it's going to be breakout, retest, and off we go. But instead of that, it does the fake out and then close back inside. All right, we have a candle closing inside the channel. What are we expecting now? We're expecting that this price action at least hits the median, and then with greater chance start getting somewhere close to the low areas here, right? So that's why I want to give myself some space within the channel, right? Let's do that example here. Let me see if I can draw it for you guys here. So basically, if I would have gone here and closed inside the channel, right? Well, then I would see maybe another wick in here and then see this, right? So I want to prevent getting stopped out right here, right? So when it goes back down here, because we're shorting, remember, let's just go for somewhere around here, right? Because we're shorting, I want to give myself a little bit of that slack, a little bit within that channel. So when the price action goes into the channel, closes in, and then retraces at support, because previous resistance becomes new support, that is when I'm going to be closing my trade in the worst case scenario at the least loss that I can have, right? The smallest loss that I can have, all right? We'll see some examples in the future, but so far, just so you understand, and when we're setting up our stop losses, right? And when we're setting our, and we're breaking out or looking into a pattern, we need to give us that slack, or we're trying to give us that slack without going crazy on our stop loss. Let me show you a couple of things in here. If my stop loss would have need to be here, right, somewhere around here, but my entry was in here, and look at where's my median. In my median, this is my median right here. Oh, come on, this is my median. In my median, it's all the way here for my TP number 1. Look at my ratio here, 0.5. If this is the case, I can do two things. And guys, this is one of my trading secrets. So I usually only share this on the paid classes, right? But just because you guys were so special today and waited for me, I'm gonna be giving it for you guys right here on this class. So this is one of two things. So I can do one of two things, right? Only one of two things. Well, let's bifurcate this area here, right? Let's go for the two options. Option number 1. Don't take the trade, right? I know we want to trade it, but if the conditions are not right, we're not gonna take it. What are we gonna be doing instead? All right, if we don't take the trade, option number 1, all right? Don't take the trade. What if your ratio is not above 1, all right? So if we don't take the trade, what do? We wait a little bit and we draw again our support and resistance. Look at that. This is a support. This is a resistance, right? Maybe I can aim for a resistance between these 2 wicks and this area here. Does it make sense? A little bit. There we go. I could be looking for this resistance right here, right? Or this resistance, and see if my price action gets rejected. If that gets rejected, now I set up my new entry. All right, let's go for that. Let me give you that example here. I set up my new entry right here after the confirmation that I'm maybe bouncing back, right, somewhere around here, right, of this area, and setting up my stop loss at, where is it? Where basically in the next or previous resistance right here, right? Or yeah, previous resistance. Why am I looking at that area? Because let me show it to you. If I just move it all the way up here, I do have these stops, right? I do have this wick, I have this wick, and I have the bodies of these candles. So as you can see, I'm using new structure here to give me my next entry and stop loss. All right, that will be if we don't take this, because remember, in this case, our ratio was below 1. All right, what would be the second chance or the second strategy that we can do, guys? And by the way, if you're starting, give it a minute. Just do it on paper before you execute it, because it comes with greater risk. This is not financial advice. All right, I need to say that because this comes with a greater risk. All right, so what we're going to be looking at this, it is a distribution of my money. All right, so I know I'm either already in, right? Maybe I went in here despite my horrible ratio, right? Despite my horrible ratio, I decided to go in. All right, maybe I F up, or you know what? I had that feeling that I could not ignore. All right, if you're having too many of those feelings, guys, it's time to take a rest. All right, take a break. So again, my ratio is very bad. So what I'm gonna be doing here for my second chance, right? This is my second strategy, is gonna be splitting my entry. So just so you know, guys, what I do personally, it is one full position equals 0 or 3%, let's just call it 3%, right, of my whole wallet. All right, so far this will depend on your wallet. If you are using leverage, you can even have less of a wallet, but in compensated with leverage, but that is very, very, very dangerous. You should be looking in how to calculate your leverage. Don't worry, we'll have in how to calculate your leverage further on these sessions, right? But so far, for me, it's at 3%. At this point, let's just call for a hypothetical $1,000, all right? What would a 3% of $1,000 be? Well, you do the math. That's pretty simple, right? But at this point, at somewhere like in 10x, I can actually divide that 3% into two entries, all right? So if I enter here, I'm going to be entering with 1.5% of my whole wallet equals half of a position, all right? Equals half of an full entry. Remember, full entry, 3%. Half of a full entry, 1.5%, equals half of my what? Of a position, which is at 3%, which is X amount of money, which is half of a position. All right. So just want to make sure that we are doing this, or that we're understanding what's happening here. Why? I usually always want to go in with a full position, and this is not going to be an exception. All right. How am I going to be doing that if basically I already entered with half a position? How do I manage that? Well, then I look for a better location of entry. So, for example, I know I have this resistance, right? Or maybe I could be expecting a breakout big retest. Oh, a breakout big retest, and then somewhere around these areas, we're going all the way back down to my red entry. All right, if I'm expecting this, well, I can set up my second part of my entry. Again, guys, this is important. All right, my stop loss, I'm not changing my stop loss. All right, I am just adding to my position, and this is also extremely important. I'm not adding a full position on top of another full position. That is chasing after your price, and that is trying to rescue a losing position. We don't do that. That's why we have a stop loss, and that's why we commit to a stop loss, right? So we learn how to set them up, and we also respect them, and we adjust the way that we set them up based on our previous mistakes. All right. Having said that, well, then my first entry is here, and maybe I can go for, maybe let's reuse this line. Maybe I can go for another re-entry somewhere around here, right? What is it gonna be doing? So half of an entry here and half of an entry here make a full position, a 3% position. All right. If you got it configured on your broker with its additive position, all right, when you open up your next sell position, it's not going to do a separate position. It's going to combine them both, basically averaging up your entry point like this, right? And remember, I'm not moving my stop loss. All right. Instead, I purchase high, right, to average up my position. And just like that, look at my risk reward ratio. Now it's worth keeping it open, right? This is where psychological things happens, right? Because you're still gonna be on loss. Let me show you how would that be looking like. Let's go and use this bar pattern. Let's grab, I don't know, let's call for this part in here. All right. And now that we have that, let's grab it here. All right. And see, I want you guys to notice, and let me clean up a little bit of my spaghetti here. All right. Let me zoom in for you guys, and you'll see that we went down. We enter in a very horrible position, entry number one, and since we decided that we were okay with the risk, we entered with half of a position, right here. Then the price reversed on us, went up, up, up. We decided that our secondary entry, because we're always looking for do a one full entry, all right? So our secondary entry, which is another half of a position, to sum up one full position, we decided to put it at 0.53. All right, right here. What happened to my price action? What happened, sorry, to my entry? It got averaged up to the center between this point, my secondary entry, and my first entry right here, right? So it got averaged up. Remember, I'm not moving my stop loss, all right? But now magically, right? Automagically, I don't know how to say that. Very bad joke. Let's not do that. Now my risk reward ratio is 1.2, right? Remember, I only take full trades when they are above 1. And just like that, we were able to manipulate our entry to 1.1. In this case, because I handpicked these bars, just so you know, I handpicked them, all right? In this case, what happened? We went down in here, all right? We were a little bit underwater, and right here is where we take our money. We move our stop to entry, all right? And then what happens? We take 50% out, stop me out. That's fine. It keeps its movement. Sometimes you're also going to have many of those, all right? What I'm trying to show you here is not that I'm just handpicking bangers, bangers, bangers. Instead of that, I'm just giving you the tools, guys, to start knowing that you will have to mediate with yourself. You're going to be fighting with that child within you that is screaming FOMO, right? And to be screaming, buy it, and sell it. But you will have to control that. And showing you this, how this market structure, it's moving. I'm trying to show you the many things that we're going to be having. But remember, in the next episode, we're going to be seeing oscillators and then indicators, right? In chapter number 3, we're going to be looking at indicators, basically trying to pinpoint entries with the market structure that we already have. All right, guys. So this is it, basically, how we trade with naked charts. Yeah, many of you might say, well, that doesn't look naked because we draw on top of it. But bear in mind that everything came from our eyes, our brains, and our hand. All right. In fact, guys, we called for the short previously and we didn't even had candlesticks. All right. So, guys, hopefully you are enjoying this. Let's go and throw some trade setups based on what we have learned. All right. So, almost, man, almost. This is my real skin color, man. This one here, right? And then this is, I just paint my face. Hey, such an honor to have you here around, my friend. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. All right, let's go and let's take a look at what else we got in here. Let's get started with Bitcoin. All right, perfect. So in Bitcoin, we already have a pattern here, right? And we've been talking about that pattern. So as you can see, we're not just yet hitting or breaking the pattern. We have a green candle. What was our entry so far? We don't have an entry confirmed at this point. If we didn't have, or at this point, right? Why? Because Friday, we learned about candles, right? What do we have here? Maybe after that candle, we could have entered on a trade for the short, right? Because that is usually what we look for after those kind of candles. That's what we look for, the short, or at the hit of our resistance, right? So far, we wait. What are we going to be seeing or doing right now based on what we have learned and the tools we got? Well, we already have a broadened wedge to the upside, right? We're already seeing that the median actually held in here and that we are almost rejecting out of here. This could form into many things. Remember, we want to forecast what's happening. Let's now look into the inner range, right? Or the inner structure here. So we got a pulley here going up. And at this point, we also have a maybe trend line that is going downwards here, right? If for some reason this inner structure, it doesn't have the definition or equal amount of candles that you may need, feel free to go into a lower time frame, right? Remember, we are not trying to go back and forth, just to give us a heads up on what is the market structure. Like, for example, here. Remember, in patterns, we talked about head and shoulders. I see a little bump. I see a little bump, and maybe I can predict another bump in here. This will also be in line, look at that, with the resistance that I drew in 4 hours, right? And at this point, remember, this could be becoming two things, either a bull flag, or it could be becoming, based on these support zones, right, into a bullish pennant. If this also becomes into a bullish pennant, let me just get rid of this so we can see this a little bit better. Here we go, right? It will also be in line of the pattern that we talked about on Bitcoin before. Let me, guys, give you a little bit of a hint in here. Little hump, bigger hump, retracement, flag, and breakout, right? Don't believe me? Don't remember? Don't worry. Let's go back in time and watch it happen. So let me go to the 4 hours, because that's what I do have the most amount of those kind of patterns. Here it is. Look at that. Little hump, further hump. We create the bull flag, right, the bullish pennant, sorry, and breaks out. Sometimes we have a sweep of the lows, and then we tend to break up again, all right? Let's go for the next one here, even micro here. Little hump, right? Let me see it. Little humping here, bigger hump, the flag, and in this case, well, it break below, but ended up going higher or much higher, right? Again, guys, none of these patterns are 100% playing out the way that mostly played out, right? But that's why we have a percentage assigning to them. The pull, little hump, right? The flag, there we go, and break up. Make sure that you're seeing this with me. We usually aim our first TP to previous highs, just to make sure that we move our stop to entry before something like this happens. All right, just so you guys know, a quick reminder on patterns. So let's go into one more on this ones. There we go. Like, for example, right here, little going up, little hump, bigger hump, the flag, right, break up. All right, so what I'm trying to tell you guys here on the 1 hour is that we could be having a break to the upside, right? But also remember what happened on the previous flag, which was, where was it? I think it was this one, or this one, where we break downwards. So we need to also understand that there is a chance that we go lower. So that's why we use the stop losses. All right, let's go to the 1 hour here once again. All right, let's double click here. And it seems like we're going for to create this hump in here, this little last shoulder. Remember, we're also looking at shoulder, head, shoulder. All right, remember what I taught you on patterns. The patterns are not the actual neither the inner or the breakouts or anything like that. It is actually the boundary zones, right? The actual gold are the zones where we can look for breakout and retest, right? So I don't really care either if this flag is gonna be breaking up or down, right? I just care that I can maybe try to short it here, maybe try to long it here, micro trades at this point, but the most important trade, which remember, that's what we talked about on the pattern class, was the breakout, right? Retest, and off we go. Or in the opposite case scenario, well, the breakout, the retest, and off we go. All right, so basically this is where the goal is on patterns: breakout, retest, right? Or that, you know, when we're breaking a limit, so maybe you can even go in here as to the breakout. Sometimes you will need to jump into breakouts, and we will not be having retest in many times, right? But in the majority of those, I rather wait for retest, right? So the goal on those patterns, once again, it's on the breakout, retest, on the boundary lines that define breaking areas of no return. All right, so far we already have the setup. What is our setup? We're going to be looking at 1 hour. What is going to be defining our entry? Well, first we can do a micro trade here with maybe half of a position or something, aiming to get something like, let me get a ruler here. This will do something like a 1% move to the downside or something like that, right? Or maybe we can try to long when the price is going lower here. This entry is already gone, but when we are back in here, maybe try to long it with a half of a percentage here. Be careful, because if you're doing half or even 1%, you're talking about 15 minutes trades, all right? This will not be feasible for the 4 hours because you won't have enough price or candle bars to predict where to set up your stop loss, profits, so on and so forth. So let's go now and let's take a look at something else. Let's go to TRX. Guys, now at this point, please let me know if you have any questions or if you want me to take a look at any specific asset. This is exactly the point or the time where I take your entry, guys, your input, and I do my analysis of what we have. All right, so let me know, guys, on the chat what you got. So far, let's go back to the 4 hour. Here we go, right? And remember what we're talking about it here, we define it in area of importance. Usually these kind of hiccups, right? These kind of hiccups represent order blocks, right? We'll have in the future set areas of order blocks, but also represent limits of support and resistances. Why? Because we have a rejection zone in here. And because we have a rejection zone in there, look at that, the next rejection zone, right? And you can see it played out nicely after. So what I'm trying to tell you guys that we talked about here before is that when we have a rejection zone, we either have a support or resistance. Previous resistance, when we break with a big body candle, that is confirmation of breakout. Remember that? So breakout confirmation is not about the breakout, it's about your retest. And remember, we were planning for this entry here, maybe going lower to these areas. So what would it be your stop loss at that point? Let's do it here. So long position somewhere around here. Let's even go for the farther high position here. Set your stop loss right there, and then give you guys a little bit of a wiggle room. Aim from the next resistance here, so somewhere around here, right there. And do we have TP number 1? Yeah, TP number 1. At that point, you take your TP number 1, move your stop to entry. What happens? It stopped you out right here. So what are we having right now? All right, we're having what seems to be a Bart Simpson. All right, usually this is where this is also called a bull trap. Why? Because it sets a set of higher lows, right? Higher highs without taking your meaningful high, right? Since we are not breaking a meaningful high, this right here becomes a inner structure. So we are not breaking or continuing having a bullish setup. And usually that ends up in an opposite trade. Doesn't matter if it's long or it's a short. It usually, in these cases where we are not taking the previous highs, it ends up breaking to the other way around. So Lost in Crypto, what's up, my friend? Welcome here. Let's see. What else do we got, guys? Let me know if we have a set of requests so I can take a look at a couple of trade setups. All right, so we have what seems to be big body candle, breakout, retest, and we need to wait. Where are we waiting? We're waiting for the next breakout retest, right? So at this point, breakout, retest, our entry for a short, and off we go. This breakout needs to take previous low. Just like in here, we wanted to take previous highs, right? Just like in this movement, we want to set a new high. And then at this point, we are trying to make whatever above this low, right? Macro trend, we want to have whatever higher low, right? So basically, this is going to be somewhere above this area. So for our entry for a short, it's going to be breakout, retest, and off we go. Now be careful, because I will be taking profits either here for this support zone. All right, let's make it more professional with this line here. Right, or somewhere above the actual low in here. Why? Because we can still create a set of higher lows, right? Macro structure, we're going low, Now we're taking some important highs, not the important high that we actually wanted to, right? But if we create a little bit of a higher low in here, right? And that doesn't mean that I'm going to be long in here at that point. I want to create at this point to create that higher low, and then on the breakout retest, that's going to be my entry after my higher low is being put on, right? So we have a macro structure here set up. Let's just make it much more obvious here. So breakout, retest, set my stop loss to previous zone, give myself a little bit of a wiggle room, aiming to my previous or my closest support for TP number 1. Am I above of 1? Yes, I can do a 1 position. Feel free to do half of a position if you want to. It doesn't matter, right? As long as you are building up your confidence here. And then I'm going to let it go, right? If it keeps going lower, well, then that's what I just took 50% out in here, just 50%, and leave the other 50% in case that I get all the way here. At this point, I'm going to be taking another 50 of whatever there is left, right? Basically, if you look at it macro terms, that will be a 21% take out at this point, or at the full position. And then the rest, I'll just trail it. So I just let it be there, right? And then, of course, I'm going to be moving my stop to entry. After I put it down here a higher low, and if that doesn't happen, just let it do its thing. But when it puts a higher low, I'm going to be aiming for my next entry at breakout retest. My stop loss be here, a little bit of a wiggle room. This is going to be a hard pill to swallow because we're going to be looking for my next take profits right here, which puts me below what? Below 1. What do I do here, guys? We already have this strategy, right? You can do 2 things, right? One, not taking the trade and just wait for rejection confirmation, right? Or take the trade with what? Half a position entry here, and maybe aiming somewhere around here or somewhere in the middle, right? It doesn't matter, whatever you like, with another half of a position there, right? That way, if this reverses on us, we can average down here in the worst case scenario, all right, the worst case scenario, and then get out, or at least move our stop to entry right there. So in case it also reversed, we're going to be stopped out at profits. Remember the strategy, right? But of course, we're not looking for it reversed on us. All right, we have TAO. Let's wrap it up with that one. Let's do TAO. Let's do it on, we already have our broker. No, whatever. Let's do Binance at this point. Let's do TAO. All right, TAO in the 4 hours. Again, let's zoom out. All right. Once we're zooming out, again, we're going to get started with major trend lines and support and resistances, right? I have one in here, right? Because of this, I can maybe draw another one either from here to there, like that. It doesn't really matter, right? I can even edit it. Well, it doesn't work. It will have to be a little bit like that. But guys, this is just too far away, so it doesn't really matter. I want things that are closer to my price action, right? So since I want things closer to my price action, let's also go for a little bit of a zoom in here. So I have another trend line there, right? And finally, I can set up my support and resistances. Like for example, here it's a support. Here is a resistance, and finally this area right here, another resistance. All right, for trend lines, I have another one, or better yet, a support, and we can define an inner range, right? So let's try to clean this up. We have a range. By the way, guys, this range, it has a V-shaped recovery coming down. Itty bitty range, V-shaped recovery equals 70% chance of ranging. All right. So what are we looking at here? At this point, we're looking to short this area all the way down here. Be careful. Maybe we can zoom a little bit more in here and see that we're building up a, what are we building up there? We are building up a lower time frame flagging here. All right. So how can we maybe trading this? All right, you can either open up a short right now, not financial advice. Remember that if you're going to be setting up your short, let's see for, there we go, it's set up short at this point. My stop loss should be at the previous stop with a little bit of a wiggle room. And I'm going to be aiming to my next area of, at this point, support. I see one somewhere around here. There you go. Look at that. Resistance, resistance, resistance becomes new support. All right. So am I willing to enter with a full position? Yes, I could be going to full position. Nonetheless, since we have a big gap in here and we're forming kind of like a bullish pennant, all right, I would rather be jumping in with half of a position and then maybe reallocating the next other half of a position on a lower time frame in here as we either break out or break downwards. All right, break up. All right, maybe I set up my next entry here, average up, and then on the way down for the retest, that's where I close my short position. All right, if I break downwards, well, then take TP number 1 and then just run it as we already have planned. So that way, again, we're aiming to protect our capital, right? We're aiming to hold it, to protect it, to profit out of it without that much of a risk, right? So that's we take calculated points in there, calculated movements here. So let's take a look at if we have anything else. So if we start breaking upwards in the 4-hour time frame, there we go. I'm gonna be expecting a big move. So don't FOMO in. If I get a big move, I say that I see a rejection, so kind of like an order blocking here because we have some support and resistances, a little bit like inner support and resistances somewhere around here. It's not about your breakout. Your next entry is going to be at the retest. Here we go for long and off we go. TP number 1, TP number 2. All right, with that having said, guys, I think we are successfully trading with naked charts, right? No indicators required. Remember, as you start learning many stuff in here, guys, it's not a kind of like a revealing setup. Of course that you're gonna have things that make much more sense to you, and when you have that click, guys, like for example for me, that was the patterns, right? When I learned about patterns, that was hey man, this really clicks with me. So make sure you put that in a special place on your brain, right? Because you are going to be relying a little bit more on those. That is because you feel that connection, which makes sense to how your brain is wired, right? So that's how you get started on building up your style, right? So things that are more profitable to you, that becomes or have a greater hierarchy, right? And that is because of how your brain is wired. That's why every professional trader has its own strategy, which is only a set of tips and tricks that they use the most because they can understand it better. For me, that's going to be triangles, all right? For someone else, might be trend lines, right? For someone else, that might be candlestick patterns. So you'll see how different traders have different both success rate, right? Different time frames and different importance of allocations on their both structure and indicators. So having said that, thank you so much, guys. Having said that, guys, let's see tomorrow with the next set of our with our next set of the classes, which is going to be chapter number 2, oscillators, right? And then chapter number 3, indicators. At that point, I think we're gonna be cooking with gas and we're gonna have much fun. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining, and as always, see you guys tomorrow.